All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning shir, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Menachem Av, the Tilson and Wall families, sending their love from Eretz Yisrael and inviting us to Meretz Hashem, join them there b'sha'at tova u'mitzlachos. We dedicate our learning in the schus of our precious hostages, Me'ech Baruch Hu. Return them to their families b'shalom and b'karov, and we dedicate our learning in the schus of our precious and holy soldiers, Me'ech Baruch Hu, allow them to be successful b'chol ma'aseh yadeim. So with that, let us begin. We have an incredible daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Nun Zayin 57, and we are picking up on 56b, 2 lines up from the bottom, right at the 2 dots, which is the quotation from the Mishnah. Shlosha achin ve'echem mistayfei mayin, hara'elu shlosha ejos ve'hein edos achos la'azamos. Let's remember again, the Mishnah taught us a number of different halachos, amongst them as follows. Primary amongst them was the concept that chazaka can be established through 3 different groups of witnesses testifying on 3 different years, right? So you could have group 1 testifying that Reuven occupied the land year 1, group 2, Reuven occupied it year 2, and group 3, Reuven occupied it year 3. And those 3 groups of witnesses, who are each only individually testifying about 1 year of occupancy, can combine to form the requisite chazaka unit. That was halacha number 1. The Mishnah then gave a very interesting variation of that case, where imagine the following situation: you have Reuven going ahead. Well, let's read the quotation. Shlosha achan ve'echem mitzayfei mayin. So if you have 3 brothers, now remember again, these 3 brothers are testifying about 3 years of occupancy of Reuven, right? So Reuven's occupying the field. Then you have 3 brothers who each have testimony about 1 year of occupancy. And then there's 1 witness who combines with each of the 3 brothers. So again, there's brother 1, 2, and 3. Let's say again, they're testifying that Reuven occupied the land for 3 years. Each brother testifying about 1 year. And then there's Shimon. Right? Shimon's just the guy. Shimon happens to know that Reuven occupied the field for 3 years, right? And so Shimon is going ahead and combining with each of those brothers, right? So brother 1, brother 2, brother 3. So Shimon is combining his testimony with each of those brothers. So Shimon, right, knows all 3 years, combined with 3 brothers each who know 1 year. Together, they form 3 years of testimonial unit kite to go ahead and testify that Reuven occupied the land for 3 years uncontested. Beautiful. So what's the halacha? The Gemara says, first of all, it works. That's number 1. Number 1, it works. It's considered to be like 3 testimonies. But yet, when it comes to hazama, like we saw in yesterday's daf, they're considered to be 1 testimonial unit, which means that if, for example, you would want to make them into Eidim Zomamin, what would have to happen? You'd have to make the entire unit into Eidim Zomamin in order to go ahead and impose the reciprocal Eidim Zomin or Hazama punishment. Beautiful. Says the Gemara, top of Nun Zayin, 57. Haushtar, interesting case over here. Haushtar dahavi chasimi aleh beitrei. So listen to this. There was a shtar. The shtar had 2 witnesses on it. So far, so good. Nothing out of the ordinary over here, right? Witnesses, Reuven and Shimon. Okay, let's follow this along. What happens? Shachet chabinav. So we'll say, so the unwritten part in the Gemara story was that now the owner of the shtar wanted to certify it. A process that we know as kiyum shtaros. So in general, by the way, right, we like to think that just because you have a shtar, like you're good to go. It's not necessarily true. In other words, I could have a shtar, right? I have a shtar that I lend Reuven $1,000. That's fine. I bring it to Beis Din, or I come to Reuven to collect. What could Reuven claim? It was forged. It was forged. So having a document by itself doesn't necessarily give you complete power, transactional power. So what do? If you want to ensure that your shtar cannot be contested? You undergo a process called kiyum shtaros, shtar certification. Now, what's the process of shtar certification? It's actually pretty straightforward. You show up in Beis Din, say, here's the shtar, let's do $1,000 to Reuven. What does Beis Din do? Beis Din says, okay, Reuven and Shimon signed on this. Let's get Reuven and Shimon in here, right? Have them certify their signatures. Have them certify, if they can, about the transaction. Beis Din goes in and puts like a stamp on it. We're good to go. That's called certification. And like that, we'll say, that shtar, that's ironclad. That's ironclad. Now, no one could claim really anything was going on with that particular shtar. So now, back to the top, now watch this case. So there was a shtar. I lent, we'll call it, let's keep it simple. I lent Yehuda $1,000. Reuven and Shimon signed on the shtar. So what happened? So the Gemara says, Reuven died. Reuven died. So we'll say, so now I want to certify the shtar. Reuven died. So now the good news is Shimon came in and Shimon certified his signature. Okay? Problem is that Reuven obviously again is not coming in to certify his signature. So what I do is first take a look at the Rashba for just a moment. Shachav chad minayu meis echamem kodem sheniskay mashtar. So Reuven died before we had an opportunity to certify the shtar. Ve'ilu lo meis hayakol echa ba'umeid levad lachasim as yado. Had Reuven not died, both Reuven and Shimon would have come in and testified about the authenticity of their signature. Ve'in sarach l'tzaref imo acher, and you don't have to combine anyone else ultimately again with the aid. The Gemara says, Ella ne'ema lomar zek ksav yadi. This is what we just said before. The way it works at Kiyum Shtaros is every witness is believed to say, that's my signature. That's my signature, and you don't need any additional eidos on that. Okay, this is not fine. So I'll say, so now what happened? So now Reuven died. So Shimon came in and certified his signature. Reuven died, we need to certify his signature. So I'll say, how do you certify Reuven's signature? How do you do that? Two witnesses. Two witnesses come in and they say, that's Reuven's signature. Now obviously the two witnesses have no knowledge about what occurred in the transaction. So the two witnesses are showing up and saying, that's Reuven's signature. Okay, watch this plot twist over here. Asa achua dahai dekoi v'chadachrina lasude achasima siadei diidach. Okay, watch this. So that's what happened over here. This is great. So now, get our story straight over here. Shimon is alive and well, came into Beis and certified his signature. Reuven died. Supposed to say, who comes in to certify Reuven's signature? Shimon's brother, and another witness come in to certify Reuven's signature. Okay, so I'll say, so now, how does this work? Because now we've got two brothers testifying about the same thing. Not exactly the same thing, but kind of the same thing. So now we've got Shimon certifying his own signature. He showed up and said, yeah, that's my signature. And now Shimon's brother and another witness certifying Reuven, the now deceased witness's signature. So what do we do with this? So Ravina wanted to say, not a problem. Hainu masnisin. This is the same case as our Mishnah. What did the Mishnah say? Gimel achin ve'echam mitzayfei mahen. I will say, what was the case of the Mishnah? You have three brothers, right? Each testifying about 1 year of Reuven's occupancy, and then another witness, right? Unrelated witness who combines with the three brothers, right? Who saw all 3 years of Reuven's occupancy. He combines with each brother to form the complete testimonial unit of Chazakah. So you see from here that it's not a problem to have brothers involved in different components of the Eidos, as long as they're not testifying about the same thing, right? So that's what's happening over here. We'll say, why do we accept the brother's testimony in the Mishnah's case? Why do we accept it? Because the brothers are not testifying about the same thing. Brother one is testifying about year one, brother two about year two, brother three about year three. They're not testifying about the same thing. The one who's testifying about the same thing is the unrelated aide, right? The unrelated guy we call him Reuven, who's testifying with all the brothers. So too over here, Ravina wants to say, in this case over here, Shimon's testifying about his signature, and what is Shimon's brother testifying about? Shimon's brother testifying about Reuven's signature. So but Pashtus, they're not testifying about the same thing, so it should be fine. Rav says, no. Me dummy, how can you compare these cases? Hasam lo nafik nichi riva demamona apuma da'achi. So I will say this is very interesting. So if you look in the case of the Mishnah, so in reality, only a quarter of the claim is really supported by brothers. What do we mean by this? So I will say, brothers, right, combined, could only comprise 1 unit of testimony. right? Let's say then the other guy, Ruvain, who is testifying with each of the brothers, he's considered to be an independent aid for each year. So essentially we look at the brother's testimony as 1, Ruvain, the independence aid, as 3. So it turns out that 3/4 of the aidus, so to speak, is coming through Ruvain, and only 1/4 is coming through the brothers. Okay, we could tolerate that. But watch this. The Gemara says, Hacha, Nofik nichiriva demamona puna dachi. Both in the case that we just quoted over here, right? In the case of Ahushtar, the case of the top of the Amid, in fact, if you think about it, 3/4 of the testimony is coming through brothers. How so? Watch this. So Shimon, right? Shimon, remember again, going back to the Shtar case, Shimon is testifying about his own signature. What does that count as? 50%. 50%. Now Shimon's brother is going ahead and half of the testimony on Reuven's signature, which makes that another 1/4. So 3/4 of the testimony is coming through brothers. The Gemara says, too much. In other words, when we can go ahead and again I will say, lav dafka that it's necessarily a 1/4, but what it's saying is when a significant minority of the testimony is coming through brothers, and couple that with the fact that the brothers are not actually testifying about the same thing, we can deal with that. When you have an abundance of testimony coming through the brothers, then ultimately, again, that is going to be a bit too much. Okay, it's just differentiating the cases. Incredible. I will say, new Mishnah. Elu dvarim sheishlan chazaka. This is a great case. Ve'elu dvarim sheishlan chazaka. These are the things that create chazaka, and these are the things that don't create chazaka. Now, both say, now, what does this mean? So remember again, chazaka 101. How do you establish chazaka? Chazaka is established through uncontested use, right, for a prolonged amount of time. What the Mishnah is now telling us is, but it only works if it's the kind of use that's demonstrative of ownership. Versus, there are types of use where someone could allow you to use their property for a prolonged amount of time because it doesn't matter to them what you're doing. Right? It's just inconsequential. In other words, we spoke about this, that in order to establish chazakah, it's not just uncontested use. It's uncontested use that's demonstrative of ownership. But if you're using the property in a way that's not demonstrative of ownership, i.e., the owner knows that you're using it, but maybe he just doesn't care. He just doesn't care. It doesn't matter to him. Then that's not going to be demonstrative of ownership. So watch this. So these are the activities. These are the activities that ultimately, again, can result in chazaka. And these are the things. These are the activities that are not demonstrative of ownership, therefore will not result in chazaka. Here we go. So say, now listen to this, right? I have an animal. And again, we're going to define the scope of this Mishnah, what kind of case we're talking about over here. But what happened? I go ahead and I establish or I leave an animal in a chatzar. So in other words, I have an animal, Reuven has a chatzar. I allow my animals roaming around Reuven's chatzar uncontested. Or tanur ve'rechaim b'kirayim. Or I place my oven, my stove, I put that in someone's chatzar. Or megadol tarnagolim, or I let my chickens roam free in someone else's chatzar. V'nosin zvalo b'chatzar, or I put my manure, right, in someone's chatzar, in a chazaka. These are all these cases don't establish chazaka. So we'll say, so again, it sounds a little bit strange because, I don't know, sounds like usage of ownership. So we'll define in the Gemara why this isn't chazaka. What the Gemara is teaching me is, if you do these things for a prolonged amount of time in someone else's chatzar, and they do not contest it, you can't claim chazaka based on that. That's it. So that's halakha. Aval. However, now watch this. But if you made a wall, so in other words, let's say I put my animals in Reuven's field and I made a pen. Around them, right? I created a wall, right? Or 10 tfachim high. Or I put a tanner, I put an oven, or I put a stove in there, and I put a wall around it. All right, or I put the mill in there, right, the millstone, and I put up a wall. Or I put chickens in the house. chickens in the house, right? Or, for that matter, asamakam l'zvalo. I didn't just put manure in the chatzar, but I made a makam for it. Now, what does it mean I made a makam for it? Amuk shlosha, meaning I dug down into the ground and made like a manure pit, O gavah shlosha, or I made like a wall, right, or a height in the area upon which to put the manure. Harizu chazaka. This is a chazaka. Okay, so we'll say, so now it seems a bit arbitrary because remember again, it's the same activities, yet in the first part of the Mishnah it does not create chazaka, in the second part of the Mishnah it does create chazaka. So as such, asks the Gemara, Ma'ishna Reisha or Ma'ishna Seifa? I don't get it. What exactly is the distinction over here? So we'll say, now watch this. So the Gemara gives an interesting idea over here. Amra Ula, so Ula says, Kol she'ilu b'nichse ager kana, b'nichse chavero kana, Kol she'ilu b'nichse ager lo kana, b'nichse chavero lo kana. So we'll see, so remember again, hearkening back to our previous sugya, nichse ager. So what happens in nichse ager? Ager dies with no inheritors. So what's the halacha? Who gets his property? It's hefker. So we've already established, though, like in any item of hefker, in order to acquire it, you need a ma'aseh kinyan. You need an active acquisition. So Rabbi says, now the shaila becomes. So therefore, Ula says as follows: essentially, whatever type of activity works to acquire the ownerless property of a ger works to establish chazaka, and whatever does not work to acquire the property of the ger will not establish chazaka. So let's analyze this. Let's analyze this a little bit. So take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. The Rashbam says, Kol she'ilu b'nichse ager kana kegon asiyas mechitza v'rafak ba'parta. So for example, right, when it comes to going ahead and acquiring nichse ager, so how do you acquire nichse ager? You put up a wall. Right? So putting up a wall absolutely allows one to establish chazaka. Right now, that's not just by nichse ager. Putting up a wall, putting up a mechitza in general is one of the ways to establish chazaka. By nichse ager, there's nothing. What can you do? Rafak ba'parta. If you dig a little bit. That's the case, by the way, of digging 3 tefachim down in order to go ahead and make a place for your manure. So Ravina wants us, so Ula wants to suggest that here's the metric. Whatever ultimately works to acquire nichse ager, ultimately works for chazaka. So therefore, 2 examples in the Mishnah: putting up a wall, mechitza. So in the first part of the Mishnah, where there was no mechitza, there was no animal pen, right? There was no chicken coop, right? There was no wall for your manure or digging down. Then again, no chazaka, because it would have worked for nichse ager. In case number 2, where you put up a wall, you dug down, you made a mechitza, you dug down, that would work for nichse ager. Therefore, it works to establish chazaka as well. Okay, so the Gemara says, here's the problem. Rav Sheshes says, is that true? In other words, does that principle actually work? That whatever type of activity acquires nichse hager creates chazaka? What about the following? V'hari nir. The nichse hager kana, b'nichse chaver lo kana. So we'll say, what about a nir? Now, nir means plowing, right? Plowing. Look at the Rashbam for just a moment. Nir. It's about 7 lines from the bottom of the daf. Arminum apirkin dela'el. We just had this not so long ago. To the kule alma near lo havi chazaka b'nichse ager. Right, near no havi chazaka b'nichse ager. Afilu rafak ba'porto b'nichse chaber le'inyan shalosh haram lo kana b'chazaka zu. Lefisha kol talui b'achilas peros. Shim yachrosh v'lo yochal ein balakarka mafsid shar yizar v'achar. Listen to this. What if you plow? Right? What if you plow a row in a field? So we'll say, interestingly enough, plowing a row works for nichse ager, right? Because remember, again, for nichse ager, even just digging, all right, rafak ba'porta, even just digging a little bit, goes and establishes chazaka. So I'll say this is very interesting. However, when it comes to acquiring a field, let's say chazaka, so plowing a row doesn't work. Why not? I'll say this is fascinating. Because just because you plow a field doesn't make you the owner. Why not? Because the owner could say, right, the true owner could say, okay, Silber's plowing my field. Hey, go for it. Go for it, right? Go right ahead. You want to plow my fields for free? Happy to have you do it. See, in Chazaka, Rabbi say, in Chazaka, you have to be consuming something of the field. You have to be utilizing the field in some type of beneficial way. That's demonstrative of ownership. But to go ahead and plow it, while that's a constructive act, lav dafka is demonstrative of ownership. So all that's happening over here is Rav Sheshis is saying, Ula, your principle doesn't work. Ula wanted to say, whatever type of activity works to acquire nichse hager, works to establish chazaka. Comes along Rav Sheshis and says, not true. Plowing is a perfect example. Plowing will acquire nichse hager, right? Because for hefker, in general, all you have to do is something demonstrative of ownership in some way, right? Of usage of ownership, right? So plowing will work, digging will work. When it comes to chazaka, it's actually interesting. We'll say it's funny how, like, the further we go along this parak, the more we refine our definition of chazaka. So now we'll say it sounds like what Rav Sheshes is saying. By the way, if you think about it like in a nuanced fashion, it's not just usage demonstrative of ownership that establishes chazaka. It's usage which involves consumption that is demonstrative of ownership of chazaka. So plowing will not establish chazaka because there's no consumption aspect to it. So Rav Sheshis comes along and pokes a hole in Ula's idea. Furthermore, again, here's another example. Now we'll say, watch this. Consumption of produce. Now, consumption of produce does not acquire nichse hager. Yet, consumption of produce does establish chazaka. Isn't that fascinating? And it makes perfect sense, right? So we'll say, for hefker, you gotta do something with the land, right? You have to put up a fence. You have to dig a little bit. You have to do something with the land. For chazaka, what do you need? For chazaka, you need usage, demonstrative of ownership that involves consumption. So this is fascinating. So therefore, again, comes along Rav Sheshas and gives two examples where Ula's principle does not work. So for example, plowing will acquire nichse hager, but it won't establish chazaka. By nichse hager it works because you're doing something with the field, therefore again acquiring from hefker, but yet there's no consumption element to it, so it won't establish chazaka. Consumption of produce will work for chazaka because you're doing something demonstrative of ownership that includes consumption, but yet will not work for nichse hager. So therefore, again, Rav Sheshes essentially blows a hole in Ula's idea. So therefore, Ela Amr Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman comes along and says, Ela Amr Rav Nachman Amra Bar Avua. Suppose but remember, before we turn the page, what are we trying to figure out? We're trying to figure out the distinction between the Reisha and the Seifa in the Mishnah, right? Both the Reisha and the Seifa, the first part and the second part, are dealing with the same cases, right? It's all the same cases. What are the cases? Ultimately, again, I'm putting a behema in someone's chatzar, taner rechayim v'kirayim, an oven, a millstone, a stove in someone's chatzar, chickens in someone's chatzar, menorah in someone's chatzar. In the first part of the Mishnah, it's not a chazaka. In the second part of the Mishnah, what did I do? I put up a mechitza around these things, and suddenly it's a chazaka. So what is it? What's the distinction? It'd be easy to say, what's that? The mechitza is the distinction. We're looking for something a little bit more teeth, right? A little bit more sharp. What exactly is the distinction between the Reisha and the Seifa? Okay, so Amar Rav Nachman Amar Bar Avua Bosei Amud Beis Hacha. What's the case over here? Hacha bechatzer hashutfin askinan. All right, so we'll say this is very interesting. So ultimately, again, now this makes a lot more sense. So we'll say, now we're dealing with a jointly owned chatzar. So Reuven and Shimon are partners in a chatzar. They jointly own it together. Now watch this. So the Gemara says, "The behamada kidei or kidei lo kapti." Supposed to now listen to this. We are now dealing with a jointly owned chatzar. So therefore, again, Reuven and Shimon are partners in this chatzar. So when you have a partnership in a chatzar, neither partner cares what the other is really putting in the chatzar. In other words, just stam. So therefore, if Reuven and Shimon own a chatzar together, it makes sense that Reuven's chickens are going to be running around in the chatzar, right? Or that Shimon's stove is going to be in the chatzar. That's what a chatzar is used for, right? A chatzar is used for these type of activities. Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. V'acha b'chatzar shutfin askinan, she'acha min hashutfin atzmo, hamid behemosav, v'tanor v'ashba shalo b'chatzar gimel shana v'lo micha bo. So we'll say the case over here is Reuven and Shimon are partners, and what happened? Reuven put his oven in the chatzar, right, for 3 years, And Shimon never objected to it. Ustam chatzar l'knisa v'yitziyahi v'lo lahamid sham behemosav v'chafetzav zman meruba v'elcha ba'amadas behemosav greda below binyan lo havya chazak d'ma'amad k'di lo kapti shutfin zalzeh ad she'yitztach lo samakom. So we'll say, so the idea over here is the way it works in general when people own a chatzar together is, it's understood. It's understood that they're going to use it for what we call their activities of daily living. So to put the oven there, to put the stove there, to put the grinding mill there, to allow the chickens run around there, to have the behemoths over there, to put the manure there, that's common. That's common. That's normal. That's common. So therefore, Yabosai, in the first part of the Mishnah, so Reuven can't say, Shimon, you see, I'm the owner of this chatzar because my chickens have been running around here uncontested for 3 years, right? Because Shimon could say, yeah, we're partners. We're partners. And just like my chickens can run around here for 3 years also, your chickens run around for 3 years was fine. I didn't have a problem with it. That's part of partnership in the chatzar. However, second line, 57b, a mechitza kapti. Mechitza is different. Mechitza is different. So I'll say, so now, as much as partners use the chatzar jointly, no one's erecting partitions. Once you go ahead and you start putting up walls, that does not happen in a jointly owned chatzar. That we don't have. And therefore, again, if Shimon, right, if Reuven were to put up a wall, right, and it would be uncontested for 3 years, that would be demonstrative of ownership. Also, remember again, the claim over here that's happening is, right, Reuven is not necessarily claiming to be the sole owner of the property. What Reuven is claiming is the partnership was dissolved, and this walled off area, this is mine. This is mine. So therefore, again, when it's unwalled, no one can claim chazaka through uncontested usage because this is normative use of jointly owned chatzar property. But when Reuven puts up a wall, which is not commonly used, which is not the way you commonly use jointly owned partnership property, and that walled off area remains uncontested for 3 years, Reuven afterwards can claim ownership. So the Gemara says, okay, is that true? Is that true that in a jointly owned chatzar, partners don't mind this type of usage, the oven, the stove, the millstone, the chickens, the behemoths, the manure? You don't mind that? So the Gemara says, what we learned, listen, this was a little bit of shifting gears over here. Hashutfin shenadru hana'al zemizeh. All right, so this is an interesting case. Reuven and Shimon are partners, and then what happens? They took a neder not to get benefits from each other. Now, not very helpful to the partnership. They made a neder not to get hana'ah one from the other. So what's the halacha? Asurin likanes l'chatzar. So I'll say, listen to this. So neither could enter into jointly owned property, right? Which makes sense, because if Reuven and Shimon are partners, right, they own a chatzar together. Reuven says, Shimon, I'm not going to get hana'ah from you. Shimon says, Reuven, I'm not going to get hana'ah from you. They can't enter into jointly owned property because that would be getting hana'ah one from the other. So we'll say, so what do you see from here? Now, here's what's interesting. What's considered to be hana'ah? What's considered to be hana'ah is just walking into the chatzar. So what do you see from here, Bosai? You see from here that shutfin partners would normally be makbid even just on any type of usage of the chatzar. In other words, that based on this, in other words, I will say, the fact that it's usher if they make a neder not to benefit from each other indicates that they are makbid on how the other uses the chatzar. If that's the case, then bepashtas, Reuven and Shimon would be makbid not to allow the other to use it for the chickens, for the animals, for the manure, and so on and so forth. Ela Amar Nachman, Amar Baravua, Hacha berachava shel achori batim askinon. So you're right. What is the Mishnah talking about? The Mishnah is actually not talking about the chatzar. Rather, what is it talking about? The backyard. As we'll say. So by Pashtus, in the question, remember again, in the classic case of chatzar in the Gemara's model, how do you have what's a chatzar? A chatzar is you have multiple homes that open into a jointly shared courtyard. But there could also be a backyard. So we'll say, so in other words, generally, you're not going to use the front yard for like established usages like chickens, animals, and depositing of manure. That partners are makbid on each other. They are makbid on each other, not to use it for that. So what's the Mishnah's case? The Mishnah's case is the use of the backyard. The backyard, they're not going to be makbid on each other, right? So again, in the backyard, in the jointly owned backyard, so if Reuven wants to have his chickens, his animals, or his manure around, then Shimon's not going to be makbid. You start putting up walls, start putting up mechitzas, that's where we're going to be makbid. The Gemara says, so with the use of the backyard, ultimately again just stam usage is not going to be a problem, but putting up a mechitza absolutely is going to be a problem. Rav Papa says no. Idi v'idi b'chatzra shutfin. So Rav Papa wants to make a suggestion. Rav Papa wants to say our Mishnah and also the Mishnah by Nedarim are both talking about jointly owned property. And certain times there is hakpada, they are makbid, right? And certain times they're not makbid. What does that mean? So listen to this. Gabi mamona lakula, gabi isur l'chumra. So Rav Papa wants to just say it's two different cases, Nedarim and our case. When it comes to a neder, both say a neder is an isser. Right? A neder is a prohibition. So Reuven and Shimon are partners, and they make a neder not to benefit from each other. So when it comes to nedarim, we're machmir. And how does that chumrah manifest itself? Neither can enter into jointly owned property. That's it. We're machmir. Our Mishnah is talking about mammon, monetary law. And with monetary law, we're mekel. And therefore what? There's an assumption that both parties are okay with the other one using the chutzner, we're now back from the backyard, back into the front yard, the chutzner, for activities of daily living. So therefore, again, they want to use it for their animal, the chickens turn around, the animals turn around, deposit the manure. Fine. What will they be makbid on? Putting up walls. That you can't do. So to use it, no problem. To put up walls, you can't do. So we'll say, so that's Rav. So therefore, again, in other words, it's two different cases. Nidarim are going to be treated on their own in a more severe or more strict way because that's Isser. That's Isser. So therefore, again, two partners make an neder not to benefit from each other. That's going to restrict everything, even mere entry into each other's property. Our case over here of the Mishnah, our Mishnah is mammon, it's monetary law. Monetary law, again, is governed by just normative expectations. And normative expectations is that when you have jointly owned property, each partner is using it for activities of daily living. And therefore, again, each partner will be fine if the chickens are running around, the animals running around, manure lying around, is fine. When will we be makbid? The moment you start putting up walls. Ravina says no. The olam lo kapti. Ravina says in reality, generally, partners are not makbid on each other. Now, the Rashbam says over here, the olam lo kapti ba'moda kidei or kidei kidesan lo havi chazak v'gabi nidar nami mutar lekanis l'chatzar. Supposed to listen to this. Ravina says in general, partners are not makbid on each other when it comes to usage of the chatzar. Right? That's what partnership means, right? That's what it means when you own property jointly, that each partner is not makbid with the other. So as I say now, here's just understand what the problem with that statement is. If that's true, then our Mishnah makes perfect sense. The Mishnah in Nedarim is problematic because if it's really true that partners don't care when just the other uses the property in a normative way, then if that's the case, then Reuven and Shimon partners who made a neder not to benefit from each other should be permitted to enter into each other's property or jointly owned property. What's going on over here? So let's say now watch this. Vahamani, whose opinion does this reflect? Rabbi Eliezer. Now, both say this is fascinating. This is Rabbi Eliezer Omer afilu vitur asar b'muda hana. So we'll say Rabbi Eliezer takes a much stricter approach to Nedarim. In other words, in general, we say partners are not makbid on each other, and therefore, again, when Reuven and Shimon own property together, they allow usage one to the other. And that's our Mishnah. That's why, again, if Reuven starts putting his animals or his chickens or manure it's fine. It's fine. The only time it's not fine is when you begin to put up walls, right? You erect partitions. That's when it's not fine. But stam usage is fine. But one second, if stam usage is fine, then if Reuven and Shimon are partners and they make an neder not to get benefit from each other, why can't they walk into jointly owned property? To which Ravina says, because that's reflective of another extreme opinion by Nedarim. Who's the extreme opinion by Nedarim? Rabbi Eliezer. What does Rabbi Eliezer say? That even Vitor is Asra. Let me tell you this outside, then we'll see it inside. So the halach is like this. It was common practice that when you bought goods, it was common, right? You would go into the merchant. You'd go in, for example, the Rashbam's example is nuts. You'd go into the merchant to buy walnuts. So what happened? It was common that when you bought, I don't know, whatever it is, a kilo of nuts, that what would the merchant do? He'd give you an extra walnut. That's called vitor. That's called, right, like mevater, like yeser, extra. Right? Give him a little, that's common. That was done, that's just good faith. I will say, it's such an interesting thing. You know how like when you buy something, you see this, like when you buy something and someone gives you like a little extra, even though the extra is worth like 5 cents, right? It doesn't, but like it engenders such a goodwill when you feel that someone is like going above and beyond for you a little bit. So this was common in the marketplace. Right? They give you a little bit of extra, and so we'll say, so Rabbi says like this. We'll watch this case, right? Reuven is a merchant, right? A walnut salesman, right? Shimon goes in to buy his walnuts, and again, I will say now. The subplot to this is Reuven and Shimon also made a neder not to get benefit from each other, or at least we'll call it Shimon made a neder not to get benefit from Reuven. Right? So now Shimon comes in to buy his walnuts. Reuven gives him his walnuts. Okay, that's fine. He's paying for it. It's not considered to be benefit. And now what happens? Reuven wants to give him the extra walnut because that's what Reuven does for all of his customers. In fact, that's what he does for anyone walking into his shop. Rabbi Elazar says, Reuven can't do it. He can't give him the extra walnut because that would be considered to be Shimon getting benefit from Reuven. So we'll say this is a more extreme position by Nedarim because again, normally, according to everyone else, we don't even consider this benefit, right? Because that's what he does for everyone. This is not unique. It's almost like the price of doing business. Yet Rabbi Elazar says that it's aser. So therefore, again, I will say the Mishnah of Nedarim reflects the view of Rabbi Elazar. So the same Rabbi Elazar says that Reuven the merchant can't give Shimon the extra nut. Also holds that Allah Chalamaisa, if Reuven and Shimon are partners, have jointly owned property, neither could enter into the property of one another. In other words, so Rabbi Elazar has the most restrictive view when it comes to Nedarim, that Allah Chalamaisa, they cannot benefit from each other at all. Okay. Fine. So Vitra Aser Barna. If we take a quick look at the Rashbam says over here, Afilu Vitra Aser is the first wide line. Kigon Balabayis Shemudra Hana Mechenvini. So the Balabayis, right? They'll call him Shimon. Made a neder not to get benefits from Reuven the shopkeeper. V'shalach lo Balabayis Pruta Lechenvini Liknos Yimeno Mea Egozim. And he said to the Pruta to buy 100 nuts. The Pruta v'Hosif lo Chenvini Achas Yisera Oshtaim Aser Balabayis also Vitra Shosir lo Chenvini Dematonahu. Even though, again, this gift, so to speak, is not something that Reuven is doing uniquely for Shimon. Reuven does this for everyone. Nevertheless, Rabbi Elazar will say that it's aser. Umir Rabbanan Sharo. The Rabbanan say ultimately again that this is mutter. So therefore, again, I will say, so Ravina is suggesting that halacha l'maisa, the Mishnah in the Nedarim is the view of Rabbi Eliezer. So therefore, I will say what comes out over here is as follows. So therefore, bottom line. So now this kind of resolves the first part of the Mishnah. So how do we understand the case of the Mishnah? So first of all, the case of the Mishnah is dealing with jointly owned property. That's the case. Reuven and Shimon are partners in a chutzner, and now the Mishnah is trying to figure out what type of activities allow Reuven to go ahead and assert chazaka. So the Gemara says, if they're just using it in a normative way, activities of daily living, in other words, Reuven comes along and says, Shimon, you see, I was allowing my chickens were running around in the chutzner for 3 years uncontested. That shows that I'm the owner of this chilik of the chutzner. So we dismiss such a claim like that. Why? Because in jointly owned property, it is common for partners to allow each other to engage in activities of daily living, which in the times of the Gemara include allowing your animals, your chickens to run around and depositing your manure. So that is considered to be, again, normative activities of daily living and therefore cannot establish chazaka. However, what doesn't a partnership normally allow for in jointly owned property? Putting up walls. So if Reuven were to put up a wall, in other words, we'll say he were to put up a pen for his animals in the chutzner, and then after 3 years again, that's uncontested. Now he claims, Shimon, this is my chilik of the partnership property. That would be a valid chazakah, because erecting a partition, putting up a wall, would not be a normative use of jointly owned property. Incredible. All right, I will say, let's go weiter. Amr Rav Yochanan Mishum Rabbeinu, Bakol Shutfin Ma'akvin Ze'ezeh, Chutz min akvisa. So I was going to listen to this. In general, partners do have the ability to object to certain types of usage. Right, if you take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment, it's about 4 lines into the wide lines, 5 lines in. Bakol shutim akvin, bakol tashmishna kvun b'chatzar dumya damadas behemos ana v'kirayim shemamatin avir achatzer yicholin la'akif ima echad rotza lasos levado v'chavera in rotza lasos kin. So now watch this. In general, partners do have the ability to object to the other's usage of the chazar. So, for example, let's say now again we'll see this halacha l'maisa true or not, but l'maisa, in other words, let's say Reuven is allowing his animals to roam around the chazar. So, assuming Shimon is not doing the same thing, Shimon has the right to say to Reuven, stop, right? Don't do that. The one thing that partners can't object to the others doing is laundry. Chutz min hakvisa. You can't prevent a partner from doing laundry in the chatzar. As we're both saying, it's almost as if if you have a chatzar, one of the built-in rights you have with usage of your chatzar, laundry rights. Laundry rights. Why? Because we'll say, literally translated, it is not the derech of Jewish women to become debased by doing laundry by the river, or by doing laundry. What does this mean? So we'll say, so remember again, the default assumption over here in the Gemara, societally reflective, not to read anything more into it, is that it's the women who are doing the laundry. We'll say, now where was laundry often done? By the base of the river. Now we're going to see again, the problem is, when washing clothes in a body of water, what would end up happening? Woman would lift up her dress, right? Because she doesn't want her dress to get wet, so she would expose her legs, Rashbam says. So that would often place a Jewish woman in a compromised modesty situation. So because of that, again, it is understood that when you own a chutzner, when you have rights in a chutzner, laundry rights are always part of that. And as much as Reuven can say to Shimon, I don't want your chickens running around the chutzner, Reuven cannot say to Shimon, I don't want you doing laundry in the chutzner. That is understood that is part of normative chutzner usage. So if you look at the Rashbam says over here, Chutz min hakvisa, he says, Shetiknu l'chacham shiyasa b'chatzar bal karchan shal shotvin, lefi shein darkan leizbazo, shetzrichos lamod sham, yechefos legalos shok lamo benar. So again, because if you prevent someone from doing laundry in the chatzar, they have to do it by the river. They have to do it by the river. Ultimately, again, it could place a woman into an immodest situation. Incredible. Now this actually sparks a fascinating conversation. So the Gemara says, Va'otzim, the Gemara quotes the pasuk, Va'otzam einav miraos bera. So literally translated, pasuk in Yeshayahu, closes his eyes from seeing evil, from seeing negativity. So what does this refer to? This refers to a man who does not look at women when they're doing laundry. So as we said before, when a woman is doing laundry by a body of water, she has to go ahead and lift up her dress. So what does it mean when the pasuk says he closes his eyes from looking at evil? Not that the woman is evil, chas v'shalom, but what it's saying over here is a man prevents himself from looking at something immodest. So the Gemara says, Heichi dami. What's the case? What's incredible Gemara? Heichi dami. So I'll say, if a man, let's call him Reuven. If Reuven's walking and he knows that by the particular river women do the laundry, so if there's another way for him to take, right, so that he doesn't have to go by the women doing laundry, right, and he still takes the path by the laundry, Rashahu. He's a Rasha. In other words, if you purposely go in a direction which allows you to see immodest things, you make that decision, then I'm a Rasha for doing so. So the Gemara says, if there's no other way for me to get home, right, but to pass by the river, and there are women in an immodest state over there, what am I supposed to do? Gemara calls it, that's an anos, that's extenuating circumstances. Shabbos is incredible. The olam deleka darka achrisa. In reality, again, there is no other way to get home but past the river. But either way, I have to go ahead and what? Try not to look. Try not to look. So such a Rashbam says, to turn my eyes to the side. Shabbos says incredible Gemara. So obviously, if there's no other way for me to go home, to get where I need to get to, but by the river, so I'm going there to come in contact with an immodest situation, my obligation is to somehow avert my glances, to somehow turn away. So we'll say a really incredible Overwhelming Gemara. So first of all, so what the Gemara teaches me is that a person has to be a proactive thinker. We know this. Ezu chacham haras and all that. Who is wise? One who is able to be a proactive thinker. One is able to see the future. What do you mean to see the future? That I cannot place myself in compromised circumstances. So if I know that something is a problematic circumstance, to place myself in there in and of itself is rishus, is wrong. So number one, be proactive thinker. Live life prospectively, thinking about what are the situations that I could avoid that hopefully again could prevent me from getting myself into trouble. Sometimes, however, again, I can't avoid certain life scenarios and situations. But even in those, I still have an obligation to go ahead and resist temptation to sin. It's such an incredible idea. Even if I don't have another way to get home, so there is no way for me to navigate but to pass by the river, where I'm going to potentially see things that I should not see, I still have an obligation to avert my glance. Sometimes in life, I can't avoid being in compromised situations. But even if I can't avoid getting there or being there, I must find a way to navigate it, b'kedusha b'tara. So two dramatic lessons. Number one, be prospective. Don't allow yourself to get into bad situations. Don't allow yourself to get into compromised scenarios. That's lesson number one. Lesson number two, sometimes again, you can't avoid it. You just are where you are. Even in those situations, a person never has an excuse to say, well, I'm already here, what could I do? But even if I find myself against my will placed in a compromised situation, I still have an obligation to navigate it, b'kedusha b'tara. Incredible. So now we'll say I want to give you just coming attractions. We have Agarata. It's not really Agarata. We're going to see a little bit of Agarata, Meretz Hashem, tomorrow's daf, but really some beautiful Gemaras. Listen to this. Rabbi Yochanan asked the what does the robe of a Talmid Chacham look like? In other words, what are the measurements of a robe of a Talmid Chacham? So kol she'ein b'sar nir mitachtov. So I'll say, so the idea over here is that the robe of a Talmid Chacham has to extend so that his legs are not visible. Right? Literally, again, you can't see his legs. Rashbam points out to her that even if he walks barefoot, you can't see his feet. So it goes down to the ground. Okay? Talish Talmid Chacham ketzad. What about the talis? What about the cloak? Right, the cloak of a Talmid Chacham. So the first one is a robe. This is now a cloak. What about the cloak of a Talmid Chacham? How long does it have to be? Kol she'in chaluko nira mitachtav tefach. So the idea is that his robe should not extend more than a tefach underneath it. It should not extend more than a tefach below it. Shulchan shel Talmid Chacham ketzad. Rabbi says beautiful. What does the table of a Talmid Chacham look like? What does the table look like? So this is fascinating. Shnei shlishi gdil ushlishi galoi. So I'll say now. Remember again, the way they used to eat was at individual tables. So if you can imagine, it's like a tray table, right? So what does the table of a Talmid Chacham look like? So I'll say. So first of all, 2/3 of it, right? The closest 2/3. Let's talk about the width of the table now, because remember, I will say this was like a table for one. It's not like the table we think about. Everybody had their own table. So Talmid Chacham has his own table. So how is the table of a Talmid Chacham arranged? So 2/3 of it is covered. So the 2/3 closest to it of it is covered with a tablecloth. Now we'll say the Rashbam points out over here. He says, well, let's read it. So shnei shlishi gdil. So 2/3 of the table closest to Talmid Chacham ultimately again are covered. Ushlishi galai, the third that is furthest away from him, like the last third of the width, furthest away from him is uncovered. Va'alav ka'aros v'yarek, and on that you place the pots and the vegetables. So we'll say it's fascinating. The tablecloth served two purposes. First of all, you put your bread down on the tablecloth. The tablecloth was also the napkin. It's also the napkin that Rashbam points out. That's what you would wipe your mouth and your hands with. So 2/3 covered, that's where you place your bread. That's what you wipe your mouth with. And the 1/3 that was uncovered, ultimately, again, that's where you go ahead and you place the pots and the vegetables and everything else. So I will say, I'll just mention, we'll have to stop over here for today, but I'll just mention something amazing. What's the pshat with this, right? What does the clothing of a Talmid Chacham, right? So the Talmid Chacham's robe has to be long enough to cover his feet, and his cloak has to be long enough that not more than a tefach of his robe extends underneath. And what does his table look like? His table is 2/3 covered, 1/3 uncovered, and the bread goes here and the vegetables go in the pot. I will say, What makes a Talmid Chacham a Talmid Chacham? What makes a Talmid Chacham, right? What allows for life excellence? And the answer is Seder, order. Order. When there is a structure to your life, that allows you to self-actualize. The greatest challenge of us that sometimes we have to living is that we don't have structure. So I'm over here, I'm over there, I'm on this, I'm on that, I'm looking here, I'm looking that, and I'm never focused on what has to get done. I'm always distracted. And when I am distracted and when I am all over the place, so often what's happening is I end up doing a lot of things, but most of them are 70%, 80%, 85%. That's what happens. What makes greatness, or what is the structure that, or what is the rubric, or what is the framework that allows for structure, that allows for greatness? Structure. When a person has a seder in life, I will say this is why. This is why, by the way, when we speak about learning, if you notice, the conversation is never about learning. How do Chazal refer to learning? How do they refer to it? Kvias itim. Setting aside time. It's not just about learning. What's the godless of learning? I have a set time. I have a set time. Let's say this is what it is. I come to a shir at a set time. It's not just about learning the daf. It's about learning the daf at a particular time, in a particular place, every single day. Why? Because it creates structure. It's not just about the learning of the Torah. It's about creating structure in your life. This is what the Piazetzna says. Right? The Piazetzna, we learn this in Bnei Machshavatova. Right? The Piazetzna wrote, the most important thing is schedule. Schedule your day. And he says, even, we said this minute, you want to hang out with your friends? Go for it, Piazetzna says. How much time? How much time? When are you doing it? Where are you doing it? Where does it begin and where does it end? If there's structure in life, you can accomplish so much. Lack of structure, you end up doing a lot of things. Most of it doesn't. Most of it is fine, but you never really advance your life agenda. The Gemara says, how do you know what a Talmid Chacham is? Talmid Chacham is someone who has seder, has order. He has order in the way that he dresses. He has order in the way that his table is arranged. Everything has a seder. Because when there is structure in life, structure can't always be so rigid, because sometimes you have to pivot a little bit. But when there is structure in life, excellence is sure to follow. So stop over here for today. More incredible Gemara tomorrow. Shkoyach. All right, Chevron Zoo, have a great day, everyone.